Hello, my name is Micheal Cummings. I'm here in Birmingham, England at the Festival of Quilts exhibit 2022, and they have invited me to show some of my quilts. So I'm standing in front of my quilts called I've Known Rivers. It's a title from a Langston Hughes poem, and what I've tried to do is write the poem around the border of the quilt and also to have this female form personify the poem. And I've been quilting for about 40 years, and the way I construct my quilts, it's all appliqué, and I do a zigzag stitch. And some of the materials I use, among many, is a textile paint that I've used in this area right here. And I've just started to use lettering in my quilts. And so here I use a stencil with textile markers. And so again, I've used a variety of fabrics and textures. I have beads here, mylar fabric here, and down here again more lettering and buttons and beads. And so this is the quilt called I've Known Rivers, and I did this in 2020. And moving over here, this is James Baldwin, and the name of this quilt is James Baldwin Born Into a Lie, and it was made in 2019. And the story behind this is that he wrote a statement about how he was born in America. He grew up believing the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, everybody was free, civil rights and equal for all. But once he became an adult, he realized as a person of color that didn't apply to him. And I put an X across his face because when going to school and you had the wrong answer, they would put a red mark on your paper on whatever was wrong. So I put a red mark across his face indicating that he was the wrong color, the wrong person, and he didn't fit in, and there were rejection. And so that's what that symbolizes. But in addition to the other symbols on the quilt, he grew up in the church, and he was actually a minister when he was a teenager. And so he really embraced the Bible. He knew it by heart, and so a lot of his quotes and everything that he related to as an adult, he quoted the Bible, and he knew it very well. So I put the Bible in here, and I also put buttons on the Bible, giving it like a mother of pearl look here. And then I've also have like a necklace here made of sequins, and I have buttons and beads, and I've also have symbolism in the fabric. I have American flags, which he grew up in America. The American flags are on top of kente cloth, which is from Africa, Kenya, Ghana, I take that back. And then we have this rebel flag here that's a very negative symbol in America because it was a group of states that wanted to break away from America and enforce slavery. So that's in there too because that's still alive and a belief in different parts of the South. And so this is called, again, James Baldwin, Born Into a Lie. We're looking at the quilt now called Micheal County, North Carolina. And this quilt was a commissioned quilt that I was supposed to do. I say supposed to because at the last minute they canceled the commission because the money was withdrawn from the government. But I wanted to carry on with this because in North Carolina, one of many southern states, you had cotton was the major income that producing product for that state. And in this particular instance, this shows you sharecroppers. Sharecroppers are people that after the slavery, you had all these ex-slaves that had nowhere to go and nowhere to live. And so the landowners would rent out land to them, and their major product was like growing cotton. So you have the entire family here picking cotton, a little girl, mother, father, and maybe a brother over here. And they didn't go to school. They just worked on the farm. But there was a future for some people. And up here, I have a train going east. And that train was a very common way that people did their exodus out of the South and migrated to the east. And I have in the windows of the train little photographs of New York because a lot of people went to New York, a lot of people went to Chicago. But I wanted to show the history of the South and one aspect of it, how there were sharecroppers that continued to work in the cotton fields there. And this symbolizes the cotton. And they all had cotton bags because when they picked the cotton, they had to put it in the bag. And the bags would take about maybe 20 pounds. They would drag along the ground. And the little children would have their little bag to do that as well. And again, this is all appliqué, and I've incorporated some African fabric. This is called mud cloth up here, and my quilts generally take about 2 or 3 months to create the quilt top. Again, all applique, and with a zigzag stitch. Some of the threads I get to complement the fabric, some I get to highlight the fabric, but I use a variety of colored threads all over. We're standing in front of my Gee's Bend quilt, and I say that is because I made it in honor of the Gee's Bend quilters. They have a tradition of creating some beautiful abstract quilts that look like paintings, and they did it without any knowledge of modern art or any type of art. They were in like a secluded area of a southern state called Alabama, but among all their patterns that they did traditionally pass on to other family members was a pattern called housetop. And this is my version of the housetop. Housetop was just a variety of strips of rectangle fabrics positioned horizontally and vertically, and some squares included also. And there wasn't just one way to do it. The women competed with each other to outdo each other with colors and different angles. And so I thought I would try doing it because it looked so simple, but once I got into it, I found it was very complex, and I got a headache working at it, and then I didn't know when to stop. You can see this is like 10 feet across, and it's about 5 or 6 feet tall, and I tell myself it could have been 2 quilts or half a quilt. But anyway, this is called housetop again, and it's a very traditional pattern that the Gee's Bend quilters use. And I wanted to honor them, so I did my version of housetop quilt. We're looking at now my quilt called Henry Matisse Goes to the Cotton Club in Harlem. The Cotton Club during the Harlem Renaissance was 1930s through early 40s, and it was the high point of where you could go see the best of jazz that African American people were playing. Count Basie, Duke Ellington, a variety of singers all performed in this club, and it was exclusively for white patrons. Black patrons could not go in, although all the performers were black. And so I went to see an exhibit recently, a few years ago in New York, where they said Matisse came to New York several times, and he went to jazz clubs. And if you know his work, you know it. There is a point where he does do a variety of art forms, collage and paintings related to jazz. And since he came to New York and he liked jazz, I assume, this is my assumption, that he went to the Cotton Club because that was the best place to go to hear the best jazz. So I placed him in his quilt down at the bottom, sitting at the table with his glass of something. It could be wine or whatever. But the Harlem, besides the Cotton Club being famous for the music, they were also famous for their black female dancers. It was kind of like burlesque-like, and so they would be dancing in a variety of costumes. And so I chose one woman to represent the chorus line of women, and so she's dancing up on the stage, and Henry Matisse is down below listening to music and watching her dance. And then I have musicians on the left and right, and again, this is all applique, a variety of fabrics. I even use upholstery fabric sometimes. This is actually an old curtain from maybe the 30s that I cut up and used up here. And I have satins and linens, a mixture of blends, and I also sometimes use upholstery fabrics as well in this, but it's applique, and you can see I have the beads here, and I have buttons here, and metal bead over there, and even for a little decoration on this drink, I put some red feathers. Okay, we're standing in front of now a quilt called African Jazz number 10. It has that number because there's 12 quilts in this series. I made one every 30 days in 1990. It was sort of a challenge to myself. And the inspiration from this quilt composition came from a poster that was a photograph made by a South African photojournalist, and I found it in New York where I live, New York City, Manhattan, and I bought the poster late 1989, and it spoke to me in some strange way. I felt that I had to buy the poster, and after buying the poster, I wanted to translate it into a quilt. The poster actually was like three African men in a jazz club performing on instruments. There was a bass player, a piano player, and a horn player. And it was a black and white photograph, slightly angled, and it was also smoke-filled room with cigarette smoke. And so it was very mystical, and I wanted to translate that. And I wanted to translate the performers into sort of African sculptures. So, and I have African masks at home, so I kind of looked at those. I thought of Cubism and Picasso and breaking up the face in different forms and shapes. So this is what I ended up with. But this was number 10, so I said there were 12. This is the only one where I have monochromatic, or this a simple collection of colors, black, white, gray. Because at this point I had felt I was overdosed with too much color in my brain. So I wanted to simplify, quiet it down. So this is what I came up with. The next two went back to a lot of color. And again, this is appliqué. This was done in 1990. And this is one of my early quilts compared to what else is in the show, because I don't have a binding on this one. A lot of my more recent quilts I've been using binding, and I have more embellishments on other quilts. This has no embellishments at all. It's just all fabric on the surface of the quilt. And a lot of my quilts I sent out to have quilted. I make the quilt tops. However, I have someone else put the batting and the backing on, and they put a sleeve on the top. And most of the quilts get displayed in galleries and museums. Okay, we're standing in front of now Josephine Baker in her cabaret. Josephine Baker was a very famous international star who migrated from New York in the early 20s in a chorus group in a musical, black musical, and they went to Paris. And she was a standout because she was a natural comedian. And then it was also a burlesque show, and she was considered a beautiful body. And she was a comedian in a way, so her famous, I guess, attention getter was she did a banana dance. She wrapped her waist in bananas and it had nothing else on. And she would wiggle and the bananas would jump up and down. So she was quite a character. So in here, I have her in a cabaret with more of a quiet environment of three musicians, and of course she's the star. And I have this satin dress on, and this actually is a real dress. I didn't make it. I found it at a flea market, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. When I bought it from the lady that was selling it, I told her I was going to cut it up, and she almost cried. She said, "Oh, you're not going to cut it up?" I said, "It's going to be beautiful, though. It's going to be beautiful what I'm going to use." So this is actually the front of the dress, and I cut the back off, and I used that for another quilt. There's 2 quilts in this series, and within this series, I have a variety of fabric from rayon to cotton blends, to some linen, to satin here. And again, this is all applique. And then embellishments, of course, the dress. The dress came after the quilt was quilted. And all the embellishments come after it's been totally quilted. So this was made in the year 2000. And if you notice the musicians, they're kind of familiar to the African jazz series that I did, because I have the bass player, the horn player, and the piano player. They become sort of like family to me, and so they pop up in different places. If anyone's familiar with the Absolute Vodka Quilt series, where you see a variety of artists doing quilt images, I did an Absolute Vodka quilt, and that quilt is in the museum in Sweden, where they have a spirits museum, they call it, and they have my quilt in their art collection. And so this is Josephine Baker. Again, she was a superstar. She also was a spy for the French government during World War II. She performed, and the German soldiers came into the club, and she would pass on information to the French government of what they said about plans and things. And when she died, they gave her a very large military funeral in Paris, and they said hundreds of thousands of people came out to honor her as her last goodbye in Paris. We're standing now in front of Obama Goes to India. I missed that event in terms of on the news or anything, but when I heard about it, my imagination just went off in terms of the color, the prints, the fabrics, the mythology, and the various religions in India. So I instantly placed Obama in the body of one of the deities of the religions there. And so this is Shiva, and Shiva represents a great power and controlling the universe and trying to balance and bring peace to it. But in bringing peace, there's power, and so his power is this forked instrument here. It's sort of like a sword, but it has the fork tip there, and that helps him fight evil. And this line is also a symbol where it also helps him fight evil. And so with that in mind, and Obama being president those 4 years, he had to deal with a lot of different international countries that had a variety of political power. So I tried to indicate the major powers that he was trying to deal with at that time. At the same time, we have Mexico that is right next to the United States. So I didn't want to forget Mexico. So I have Frida Kahlo up at the very top representing Mexico. And within the composition, you can see there's a lot of embellishments, and that reflects the Indian culture and the way they decorate within their art form, and also the way they celebrate their deities by the decorations. And so a lot of these notions are actually made in India that I found in a particular store. This one right here, but this one here, and especially this up here, are all made in India, and I just incorporated them into my composition. And this is also one of the quilts that I use textile paint along here to create the letters. And these are hand-drawn, not with stencils. And I have my yellow flowers here, which I have in several of my quilts. People ask if they represent anything in particular. I say no, I just like the yellow flower. I hope you enjoyed looking at my quilts, and thank you for watching.